Internet, I hope you are doing well, staying safe and smart. Today I am here to discuss my experience at Cedar Point on its open. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, two very important disclaimers and thoughts that I need to get out of the way. First and foremost, wear a mask correctly and at all times when going out in public, especially amusement parks. Secondly, and less importantly, not all of the footage that I will be showing in this video is from my recent visit. I will be showing footage from my visits pre-corona, but just rest assured that most people in the park were wearing masks, but it won't seem like that based on this video. To visit Cedar Point, you need to make a reservation on their website for a time slot where you will enter at the park during any given hour during the operating day. The fact that this did not sell out or expire like Kings Island and Hershey Park makes me wonder if Cedar Point really is only running at 25% capacity. Upon entering the park, you can only enter through the front entrance, which is under a gatekeeper, where your bag will be thoroughly checked to make sure that you don't have any contraband, and your temperature will be taken using a thermal detector at the front entrance. To enter the park, they ask you that you use the app to scan your tickets as opposed to a paper copy or even a PDF downloaded on your phone. This is to verify that your reservation is correct and that you are allowed to enter the park at that time. Once in the park, the top three, Maverick, Steel Vengeance, and Millennium Force, all have a new system that is implemented called the Access Pass. This is very different from Fastlane Plus, which is not being offered, and they should not be confused. Effectively, you can wait in line for a little ticket that will give you about a 1 hour window to enter said ride. I managed to get an access pass once for each of the big three rides, but the problem that I found with this pass is that they don't give it up very periodically, and if you get an access pass that has two conflicting time slots, you might not be able to ride two rides in an hour. Now, this did not happen to me, but I did hear that this happened to quite a few people. My personal example is this. I got an access pass for Steel Vengeance for 1 to 2. I entered the queue at 1, I waited for around 25 minutes, and then when I was on the brake run, the ride broke down. So I was not able to get to Millie until about 1:55, where I almost didn't make it. If I had gotten stuck on the chain lift, or if the breakdown was more serious, then I would have not been able to get to the other ride, and my access pass would have become irrelevant because employees do not let anybody into the ride unless their access pass has a correct time. Masks are required on all rides, and every other row on the roller coaster trains are empty. Oddly enough, employees were not wiping down seats or restraints on the roller coasters, but on the kiddie rides like the bobsleds and the scrambler, they would wipe down the seats after every rotation, and then every 10 or so minutes they would do a deep clean after every 3 or 4 rotations. In line for Gatekeeper and Maverick, I saw an employee wipe down the railings in the line, but that was the only sanitization measure I saw being taken for roller coasters, besides masks and hand sanitizer stations, which no one was using. Throughout the park, every line for food, attractions, games, and really everything had small blue markers to indicate where to stand and to enforce social distancing. They fluctuated in length. Not all of them were 6 feet, but a lot of guests didn't obey the measures. However, I appreciate Cedar Point for indicating where to stand, as a lot of parks are not taking that into account. Throughout my entire day, I was able to ride each of the top 3 rides once, and Gatekeeper, so not a very productive day. And that's simply because waiting for the access pass really adds another layer of line. Personally, I would rather wait an hour and a half for each ride than have to plan out my day according to my access pass and wait in an additional line. It just feels very time consuming, and I do think that just having the entire queue filled would be more productive than simply having to wait for an access pass, which doesn't have any social distancing in place. Food operations were limited. Most indoor restaurants were closed, and they instead had food trucks. I really enjoy this system, and the food I had was pretty good. And the virus can easily spread when food preparation and consumption is done entirely indoors, so I really, really appreciate Cedar Point for moving the vast majority of their food outside. I will be making a bigger, broader video about parks and the reopenings, but as far as Cedar Point goes, I personally find that they should have waited to reopen because they were not prepared for large crowds in the slightest. To put it into perspective, a lot of roller coasters were closed, and 80% of the kiddie rides were closed as well. When I was in the park, I noticed that the Planet Snoopy area looked very run down, which was incredibly understaffed, and a lot of the major rides had very bad maintenance or were entirely closed. Rougarou, Magnum, XL 200, Gemini, Steel Vengeance, Top Thrill Dragster, and various other major flat rides were either closed all day or had on and off operations. I wasn't able to snag a ride on Top Thrill Dragster, which was closed basically the entire day, or Power Tower, which was testing every now and then. Steel Vengeance broke down pretty periodically. It kept getting stuck on the brake run. I was actually on it when it got stuck, and the operations were very slow because of how RMC builds their station. Personally, I think that Cedar Point did a decent job in terms of social distancing and mask policy. Again, I think that the sanitization aspect of their COVID relief could be a little bit better. But again, this was the first week. I'm sure that they will sort out the kinks in sort of the system. Overall, I think that they're doing a much better job compared to Mount Olympus and Indiana Beach, and maybe even Kings Island, just thinking of some parks that are in somewhat close proximity and that are also open. However, it's not perfect. I love roller coasters, but when half of the train is empty and you have to hold on to your mask, the camaraderie and a bit of the fun is lost. I really respect Cedar Fair and Cedar Point for implementing these guidelines, but the park experience does feel a bit disjointed, and I probably won't be going back to Cedar Point until it's more or less back to normal, and when when they advertise Fastlane, because right now the park experience feels very subpar, and I think that once there's a slight return to normal is when I will be going back, but not anytime soon. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to stay safe and try to avoid going out too much, although that is a bit, I guess, hypocritical because I just went to Cedar Point. Anyway, be safe. Have a great day.